Gather round, it's Taley time. Classics.
Hello and welcome to Taley Time Classics with Charles Scribbins. I'm your host, Charles Scribbins. Today's tale is Trusty John. Trusty John is a guy who will do anything for his king, which, frankly, is not what you want to be known for. Much better to be a flaky Chaz, I say, especially when there's dirty work to be done. You know, that sounds pretty important, Your Highness. Are you sure you want me to do it and not someone like good old Trusty John? My eyesight really isn't that great and it's dark in the sewers. Let me know if you have any food tasting duties. I can help you out there.
Trusty John, edited by Charles Scribbins. Once upon a time, an old king lay ill and felt that death would soon come to him. He called for his most faithful servant, Trusty John, to whom he said, "My time grows short. However, I am content, as my life has been long and full. I worry for my son, though, who I fear is not yet ready to be king. There is no one better than you, who has served me so well all these years, to mentor him, counsel him, and show him the ways of the world. Promise me to give him all he needs beyond the wealth and status I bestow to him, to be his foster father, or I will know no peace." Trusty John, who had listened to his bedridden king solemnly, responded, "If I could offer my life and save you now, I would. I will serve your son with the same fidelity as long as I may live." The king's stern face relaxed after receiving Trusty John's answer. "I expected as much from you, but it pleases me to hear you say it. Your first task after my passing will be to show my son all that I have left him. Make sure he is familiar with every room of the castle and all the treasures in each. However, there is one chamber, the one with the portrait of the Princess of the Golden House, you must not show him. That painting, which is hardly dry, is a danger to my son. Should he see it, it will hold a great power over him. He will feel a love so strong that he will be knocked off his feet and risk much to meet the picture's subject. Please save him from that fate."
Ooh, I've got an idea. Why not, instead of blocking off a room, just get rid of the painting? It seems like a hoarding problem. People just hate getting rid of stuff. So this painting could be the downfall of my son, huh? But I don't want to get rid of it. You can just avoid it, right? It's like, oh no, there's broken glass all over the floor, but it's kind of pretty. People can just walk around it. It's not a problem, it's art.
Trusty John again promised to do as the king wished. The king shut his eyes and drifted away, never to wake again. Trusty John let the young king grieve for some time, but after the old king's funeral, Trusty John said to the young king, "Now you must see and know all your father has left you." Trusty John guided the young king throughout all of the castle, much of which was familiar to him already, and explained the significance of each room and treasure. The young king learned much of value, but the rich history of the castle could not be taught all at once. Trusty John continued his lessons over many days, revisiting rooms to impart additional knowledge. The young king soon knew the castle well, so the omission from Trusty John's lessons did not escape his attention. Pointing to the door behind which hung the dangerous painting, the young king said, "Thanks to your teachings, I now know much about my castle that was once a mystery to me, but why do you always walk right past this door here? I know nothing about the room behind it and the objects within it." "That room is not safe," said Trusty John. "It holds within it something terrible." "I am not scared. I know every other room. I must know this one also." The king went to open the door, but it was locked and he could not force it open. "Your father's last request was that I keep you from the hardships that seeing the contents of this room would bring you." "Ah, but how can I be king of my castle if I'm not even safe within it?" the king asked. "I was just a prince when my father asked this of you, but now I am king and must be able to face hardship. How can I move away from this door now? I must see what is inside and will think of nothing else until I have done so." Trusty John, torn between two promises, between two kings, saw that no good could come from leaving the door locked. Though there may be anguish for the young king within the room, the anguish without it was certain. Trusty John reached for the key and politely asked the king to stand away from the door so that he could open it. Trusty John slowly opened the door, trying to keep his body between the portrait and the king so that he would not see it. But the servant's efforts were in vain. The painting was displayed prominently on the wall, directly across from the doorway. The eager young king peeked past Trusty John, caught sight of the portrait of the Princess of the Golden House, and fell immediately to the floor.
If I were Trusty John, there is no way I could hold back, and I told you so. Sure, this may lead to something unfortunate, but also maybe now you'll listen to me, It's unlikely. Curiosity always wins. I like how Trusty John was trying to body block the king from seeing the painting as though that stood a chance of working. Yeah, the king's just going to want to take a cursory glance into the room. Why would he actually want to examine the super secret, supposedly dangerous mystery room? Even if Trusty John had come into the room previously without the king and covered the portrait or flipped it towards the wall or, anything to minimize the risk of the king seeing this painting he's absolutely not supposed to see, since apparently getting rid of the painting is out of the question as we already covered, even then, the king's just gonna want to uncover the painting. You don't open the door and stop being curious. Ah, it's a room with a covered painting. Now I see why you didn't want me to come in here. Let's go.
"It is worse than I feared," cried Trusty John. "I have failed, and now there is great misfortune upon us all." Trusty John tearfully lifted the unconscious king, carried him to his bed, and sat by his side until he woke. Upon awaking, the king gasped and said, "That beautiful portrait! Or is that right? So flawless and lifelike. I am not sure the lady herself was not standing there behind the golden frame. I must know. Who is she?" "The portrait is of the Princess of the Golden House," answered Trusty John. "I must see her. I must go and win her favor. This love I feel for her is deep and will not fade with time, so I must meet with her and confirm that it is true." "The Golden House is no friend of ours," Trusty John warned. "Just to see the princess from a vantage point even remotely comparable to the portrait would be perilous." "Then I will need your help, my most loyal and trustworthy John." Trusty John thought on this problem for some time, but did not want to take too long, for the portrait's power over the king appeared to get stronger by the day. Finally, he came up with a plan. The princess is known to love all things golden and wishes only to be surrounded by the finest golden wares. As you well know, you have 5 tons of gold amongst your treasures sitting as nothing but bricks. Call upon a goldsmith to turn those bricks into something more pleasing to the eye with which to impress the princess.
I've got to say, I'm of the opinion that any plan that centers around 5 tons of gold is a bad plan. If I'm the king, I'd say, okay, let's go ahead and store that safely in the plan B slot and try and come up with a plan A that doesn't put a significant portion of my wealth at risk. I mean, I've heard of buying love, but this is ridiculous. You could impress me with way less than that. And you could just leave the gold as bricks. What's wrong with gold bricks? I like bricks, sleek and practical.
The king called all the finest goldsmiths of the kingdom to the castle and tasked them with shaping his gold into objects worthy of the princess. They worked tirelessly day and night as the king waited impatiently. Each time a piece was completed, the king would marvel over it and say, "Wonderful! Why, now we are surely ready to go to the princess." But Trusty John would shake his head and respond, "Not yet. There is more work to be done," until at last they had enough golden items to fill the whole of a small ship. Once every piece was stored on the ship, Trusty John and the king disguised themselves as merchants, wholly unrecognizable to anyone who may know them. They sailed across the sea to a port just outside of the Golden House. The king was eager to leave the ship and go and see the princess, but Trusty John pleaded for him to stay. "We cannot take all of the things we have made to the princess, so I will bring her here to see them. Stay below where it is safe, and you can be sure all is ready." Trusty John took a few of the smaller ornate items and stored them in his cloak. Once ready, he made his way directly to the palace. Outside of the palace, he encountered a woman standing by a well holding a golden bucket in each hand. She nearly spilled all of her water when she turned and saw Trusty John. "Who are you, stranger?" "I am a merchant," replied Trusty John, opening his cloak to reveal the golden items he had brought with him. The woman's demeanor changed completely as her face lit up. "What fine and beautiful gold!" She put down the golden buckets and closely examined each piece that Trusty John had brought. "I will take you to the princess. She will pay you handsomely for these, for she loves all things golden." The woman led Trusty John into the palace to the princess, who was elated to see such extravagant articles of gold. These are mere trinkets compared to the treasures my master holds on his ship, Trusty John told the princess. Tell him to bring it all here to me at once, the princess demanded. He will find no better buyer than me. That may be, but it would take many days and we would surely run out of places to display everything. It would be much easier to come to the ship where everything is ready to be seen. Enticed by all she had heard, the princess agreed to follow Trusty John to the ship. The king, who had been restlessly pacing on the ship's deck, saw Trusty John and the princess approaching from afar. He grasped tightly to the edge of the ship after nearly falling over, having perceived the princess to be even more beautiful than in her portrait.
Alright, if the princess is really on the verge of being literally drop-dead gorgeous to the king, shouldn't he maybe stay away from her after all? Even if he loves her and she ends up loving him, wouldn't it be problematic to get married in this situation? Every time his wife walks in the room, he falls over if he doesn't have anything to grab onto. They're going to have to spend all their leftover gold to buy a bunch of handrails to install all over the castle.
The king collected himself enough to welcome the princess and lead her below the deck, though his heart beat so fast and hard, he feared she might hear it. Not long after the king had taken the princess to see the cargo, Trusty John, who had stayed on the deck, ordered that the crew push off and set sail. Enraptured by the seemingly endless glittering in the hull, the princess failed to notice the ship's departure. She examined every single piece thoroughly, speaking excitedly with the king. Hours passed before the princess finally returned to the deck to discover the ship in full sail.
This plan just keeps getting better and better. I love that their plan is pretty much bad guy 101. Ugh, I love this princess I've never met so much. What do I do? Well, why don't we just go kidnap her, King Bowser? Brilliant! What could go wrong? We kidnap her and then she's all like, oh, thank you so much for kidnapping me. It's foolproof!
What is this? The princess exclaimed. I have been tricked and betrayed. Stay back! I will sooner throw myself off the side of the ship than let you lawless merchants lay your hands on me. Ah, but I am no merchant. I am a king, said the king, discarding his disguise. I apologize for the deception. I promise no harm will come to you here, but we could not be sure to avoid harm ourselves had we not left your home. The instant I saw your portrait, I knew I must meet you, see you, speak with you, for I fell sick with love. You have exceeded all of my expectations. If you will not have me, we will risk the journey back to the Golden House, and I will fear no harm, for my heart will already be broken. After hearing this, the princess forgave the king for his misdeeds and considered his merits. To discover that the fine collection of golden pieces was made all for her was overwhelming. She had enjoyed going through it all with the king, who she had found quite charming. Her heart was moved, so she agreed to be the king's wife. The king, the princess, Trusty John, and the crew all joyously celebrated as they continued on across the sea. The merriment was interrupted for Trusty John, however, who noticed 3 ravens approach the ship. Being alone at the very fore of the ship, he alone could hear the 3 ravens which had landed on the bowsprit. At last we can rest, and what a ship we have found, said the first raven. There is that king making away with the princess of the Golden House. Sure enough, replied the second, though he has not gone away with the princess yet. Are you so sure? Asked the third. There she stands by his side, perfectly content. A fleeting moment, cawed the first. What good will it bring him? Why, when the king reaches land, a striking chestnut steed will race up to him. But it will be a steed in appearance only, for should the king mount it, as he will desire, it will take off with such speed that none shall be able to catch it, and it will launch itself into the sky and carry away the king, who will never see the princess thereafter. Is that it, then? Asked the second raven. Is his fate sealed? Near enough, claimed the first. Should anyone be bold enough to jump on the horse before the king and kill it, then he would be saved. However, anyone who speaks of the cursed steed to the king will be turned to stone from the waist down. Just as I suspected, said the second, for I know of another end that awaits the king. Should the king return to his castle, he will find all of the preparations have been made for a wedding in anticipation of his return. A beautiful garment will be laid out for the king to wear. The king will be compelled to put it on right away, but that will be his end, for the garment is covered in wickedness, and will eat the skin of any who wear it." "Is his end assured?" asked the third raven. "Not quite," answered the second. "The king will assuredly put the garment on if given the chance. The only way to stop him from doing so would be for someone with thick gloves to throw the garment into the fireplace to burn it up. No one can tell the king of the wicked garment, for any who does will turn to stone from the neck down." "That is what I thought, for I know even more," said the third. "Should the king cheat death twice, death will grow angry and impatient, but not wish to be cheated by the king again. However, that does not mean the king will have successfully gone away with the princess. No, instead it will be the poor princess that death finds. While dancing at the wedding, she will turn white as her dress and fall motionless as though she were already dead. But death will be upon her quickly, for her lip will split, and that's where death will enter. Unless someone goes to her and sucks 3 drops of blood in which death resides from her lip, she will die. Should anyone tell the king or princess of the golden house of death's plot, that person will turn completely to stone from top to bottom. Then it seems the young king will not get away with the princess, and these are his final happy moments," said the first raven. After that, the 3 birds had nothing more to say and flew away. Trusty John, who had listened with the utmost attention and understood everything, grew quiet and sad as he considered his options. If he did not share what he had heard with the king, the terrible fates described by the ravens may truly come to pass. But if he told the king, then he himself would be turned to stone. Trusty John wished to avoid this fate for himself, but thought, "I will save my king no matter what, even if I must sacrifice my own life." At last the ship reached land, and, much to Trusty John's displeasure, the arrival began just as described by the first raven. A chestnut horse leapt out of the bushes and placed itself directly in front of the king. "Excellent," declared the king. "This fine steed shall carry me home."
Who in their right mind gets on a random horse? Horses are dangerous even when they're not evil, cursed prophecy horses. Does this horse even have a saddle? You can't just hop on a wild horse and have a pleasant trot to wherever you want to go. Now, this may come as a shock to some of you, but horses don't like having some heavy creature jump on their backs and riding them. Go figure. That's why, when someone tries to get on a wild horse, it starts bucking. Now, I take a different approach. When someone jumps on my back, I crumple to the ground and form a ball with my body. Haven't been broken and tamed yet.
Before the king could mount the horse, Trusty John jumped on top of it, drew his firearm, and killed the accursed beast. Onlookers gasped in shock and horror. Trusty John remained quiet and stoic. Some of the king's other attendants, who did not care for Trusty John and were jealous of him, called for action by the king. "What a cruel and inhuman thing to do, to harm a beautiful creature that was to take the king to the castle. It is unforgivable and must be punished." "Quiet down, everyone calm yourselves," said the king. "I do forgive him. He is my most trusted John. I may not understand his actions, but I do not doubt his benevolent intentions." The party continued to the castle, where the wedding preparations were nearly complete. In the main hallway, laid out on a table, was the wedding garment, glimmering as though it was made of silver and gold. "Magnificent," declared the king. "Let us waste no time and get to the wedding immediately." As the king began to reach out for the outfit, Trusty John stepped in the king's way, grabbed the garment with his gloved hand, and threw it into the fireplace. The objections of the other servants were even louder than at the docks. "How disgraceful and vile! To burn the king's bridal clothes, so precious, especially now as the wedding beckons. It is unforgivable and must be punished." Once again, though, the king calmly stated, "I do forgive him. It has been a curious day, but still I trust his intentions." Trusty John sat silently and solemnly through the wedding. Afterwards, when the dancing began, he did not participate in the merriment, but instead sat off to the side watching the new queen. Before even the first dance finished, the queen turned pale and fell stiffly to the ground. Trusty John rushed over, pushing the crowd away. He knelt down next to the queen and looked at her still face, deathly white save her red lips. He put his mouth against hers and sucked 3 drops of blood from her lips. As he spit the blood out onto the ground, the queen gasped for breath, revitalized. The young king, who did not comprehend what he saw, was enraged that Trusty John had kissed his bride. He cried, "Even I have my limits. I have no more forgiveness left to give. Lock him in the dungeon." In the morning, Trusty John was to be executed. He came before the king, the queen, and many other onlookers. The king solemnly asked, "Do you have any last words?" "If this is to be my end, then I have no reason to stay silent," answered Trusty John. "I have always been faithful to the king in all my deeds, including the strange events of this last day. 3 ravens there were that I heard foretell the perils that faced the king and new queen. The first spoke of a cursed horse." Trusty John felt his legs harden as he told the first raven's story, but he continued. "The second told of a wicked garment." Trusty John's voice grew soft as his breath weakened, but he would finish his story. "The third talked of death in the new queen's lips." When Trusty John finished his story, the king cried, "My dear, loyal John, stop this, come to me." But at the same time, Trusty John's lips grayed and hardened. He stood as a lifeless statue before the crowd.
I really would have tried to get away with just telling the first story. Having stone legs would be far from ideal, but at least I'd still be alive. Just tell that one and be like, "And there were 2 more ravens, and that's why I did the other 2 things." "But why'd you kiss the queen?" Come on, can't you extrapolate from the first story? "But you already killed the horse." "I didn't see another horse." "What does a horse have to do with the queen?" "Nothing. There was only the one horse, but, it wasn't really a kiss." The third raven said slightly different things, but there was still danger. "What did the third raven say?" "If I told you, it would kill me. Notice my legs here?" "I'm not convinced. That first raven story totally makes sense. I completely believe it. But without more details, I think this whole third raven thing stinks. Like, he just used the horrible events from the first raven to justify kissing the queen. Off with his head!" Alright, maybe it wouldn't work, but at least I'd try to save my life.
The king wept wildly upon seeing Trusty John's state. "Oh, how miserably I have repaid service so true and good as that of Trusty John." The king ordered the statue be brought to his room, where it would remind him of the faithfulness of Trusty John. He would often look at it, bringing fresh tears to his eyes, and say, "If only I had a second chance to put my trust in you, how I long for you to be alive once again and to be by my side." Though his sorrow did not subside, life went on for the king. The queen gave birth to twin sons. The boys grew strong and healthy and brought much joy to their parents. One day, when the queen was away at church, the king sat looking again at the statue while his 2 sons played nearby. In his grief, the king said, "I would do anything to bring you back to life, Trusty John." To his surprise, the stone statue answered him, "Should you sacrifice that which is most dear to you, you could restore my life." "Yes, yes, tell me how, and it will be done." "The sacrifice I require is the lives of your 2 boys. You yourself must slay them, and then give me their blood, which will become mine so that I may live again."
How did Trusty John get his name? I would never trust this guy. He gives the worst advice. "Go ahead, kidnap the princess. It'll be fine." Come on, I'm just asking you to murder your kids. What's the big deal? Don't you trust me? No, Trusty John, I don't trust you. You had a good run, but now you're a statue. Nothing wrong with that. Lots of people would be honored to have a statue of them in the castle. You are the statue, which is a little different and not ideal, and kind of creepy that the king is keeping you in his room, but hey, not only do you get to be a statue, but apparently you're a statue that can talk. That's cool and pretty unique. You should be happy. So in conclusion, no, I'm not going to murder my 2 sons so that one man can come back to life and live a little bit longer, if that would even actually happen.
The king was horrified to be asked to kill his sons, and his conviction wavered. He looked into the statue's lifeless eyes and thought of how Trusty John had sacrificed everything for the king's benefit. The king took his sword and, trying to save his children from any pain, swiftly took their lives. He placed his bloodied hands on the cheeks of the statue. At once, life spread to the statue. Trusty John stood fully restored and healthy in the king's grasp. "Your trust is all I desire," said Trusty John. "As you have given it, I wish to return the gift." Trusty John went to the 2 boys and placed his hands on their wounds. He returned their blood and healed their injuries. Immediately they jumped back to life. The pair started playing again as if nothing had happened. The king was overjoyed to have both his sons and Trusty John back, alive and well. He glanced out the window and saw his wife returning from the church. "Hurry," said the king to his sons and Trusty John. "Hide in the closet and do not make a noise."
Okay, wow. Now, for those of you who know anything about marriage, you might have noticed that the king has put himself in a very precarious position, even though, incredibly, everybody's alive. You don't just go and murder your children without running the idea by your wife first. Well, you shouldn't murder your children at all, but the principle holds. You don't make big family decisions alone, so now the question is, does he come clean or not? What do you mean the statue of Trusty John is gone? Oh my goodness, look! Trusty John is alive and well. How could this have happened? I guess we'll never know. Then again, this is the woman who agreed to marry him mere minutes after discovering he kidnapped her, so they'll probably get away with it.
The queen entered the room and the king asked her, "Have you been down at the church praying?" "Yes," answered the queen. "I have been praying for Trusty John, praying that there may be something we can do for this man who did so much to ensure our happiness." "Your prayers have been answered," exclaimed the king. "What if I told you that Trusty John would be restored if we were to sacrifice our 2 sons?" The queen turned pale and quiet, then at last said, "The cost is great, and I wish there were some other way. But how many sons would we have if not for Trusty John? We must do it and finally repay Trusty John for his great fidelity." The king was glad to hear this and smiled. He went to the closet and opened the door. Out came the boys and Trusty John. "He is restored, and so are our little boys, healthy as ever." The queen cried tears of joy, and the king explained just what had happened. Finally free of the guilt of the statue that had weighed on them since the day of their marriage, the king and queen's happiness no longer knew any limits, and so they were filled with happiness for the rest of their lives.
That does it for today's tale. Now, at this point in the show, we often consider the lessons to be learned from the tale, but I think we can all agree that we learned nothing from this one. In fact, please do not take anything away from this. It was a fun ride, but you can't always expect to step off the roller coaster enlightened. Let that be a lesson to you. But you didn't really learn that from the story. Just don't trust anybody who puts Trusty in front of his or her name, because it's always suspicious. Man, I can't stop learning, no matter how hard I try. No takeaways or lessons. If you think you might have learned something today, do your best to forget it.